Welcome back. You're watching The Capital Point, and we're focusing on the tea industry. Now, joining me in studio is George Omuga, the Chief Executive Officer of Ngorongo Tea Factory, who will help us unwrap the key issues and opportunities within the key industry that entrepreneurs can tap into. George, thank you so much for making time to join us on The Capital Point.
Thank you.
First of all, just tell us a little bit about Ngorongo before we get into our conversation.
Yes, thank you very much for your invitation to the studio. Ngorongo Tea Company is a locally owned company that was started way back in 1965. And so for the last 54 years, we have been involved in tea business across the value chain, from the farm to the cup. What I mean is that we produce tea by growing them in the farms. Then we also process. We have a factory that is doing manufacturing. Then we also have a packing section that does value addition. And 80% of our production is basically exported in bulk, but 20% of our production is value added in terms of branded for both local market and some bit of export market. So in a nutshell, the tea business in Ngorongo has been very sustainable, because for a company to run for 54 years, it's never easy.
Absolutely.
We are now dealing with the third and fourth generation in doing the business. That means that tea business in this country is one of the most stable businesses in the agricultural subsector.
All right. And we'll delve into that, of course, in just a moment. You know, going by those numbers, it seems 2019 hasn't been all rosy for the industry.
Yes, 2019 has been very challenging in terms of tea production. And there are a number of myriad problems or challenges that the tea sector has faced. What has impacted the sector currently is the low prices. You know, Kenya is the third largest tea producer in the world. And Kenya is the largest exporter of tea in the world. So Kenya only consumes 5% of annual production. That means that the tea production in Kenya over-relies on export market.
We don't drink enough tea.
We only drink 5% of our annual production. And that means that in case anything happens to our traditional export markets, then the tea prices must be affected in this country. Countries like China, that is the largest tea producer globally, consumes almost 90% of their annual production. Similar to India, India produces about 1.4 billion kilos of tea. And because of their population, there are an average of 1.3 billion people. They consume all their annual production and export some tea from Kenya. But unfortunately, Kenya, we are the third largest producer, the world leading exporter, and we only consume 5%. So it means we are at the masses of
the export market.
The export market.
What's your analysis of the status of the industry today?
Today, the status of the industry is not very promising, but we are still hopeful, because these are cyclic things. Because we export 95% of our production, the global economic systems affect us directly. So this had happened in 2014 because of overproduction beyond what the world can consume. And consistently, production of tea in this country has been going up year in, year out. The reason why production is continuously going up, because tea is the only well-paying agricultural enterprise in this country. Analysis,
apart from horticulture,
including horticulture, there's a study that was conducted by the University of Nairobi in 2016. And when they did a comparative analysis in terms of gross margins, tea was still giving farmers higher margins than any other agro-based crop. So it is still lucrative, and that is the reason why farmers are continuously venturing to the tea business, so that they also get a pie of the cake.
Which leads me to the rather controversial pictures that we saw circulating on social media this week, that farmers in, I think it was Bomet,
yes,
cutting tea bushes. So if indeed it is one of the highest in terms of margins in the agro space, why is it that farmers were cutting down the bushes?
You know, it is a sector that is doing well, attracts many players. And just as what I mentioned, about 5 million people depend on tea directly and indirectly. So in case of any slump in prices in tea as a commodity, majority of the people in this country will feel the pinch. And it is very sad to see what was circulating in social media. I do not know the authenticity of the clips, but it's a sad state because this is a commodity that is traded globally, and there are quite a number of forces that dictate prices. Supply and demand dictates the prices of the commodity. So in case something happens to the supply end, like in 2018, you saw production went up as high as 500 million kilos. That means that production of tea globally has been increasing at an average rate of 4 to 5%, but the demand has been declining. So currently there's an oversurplus of tea globally. And when there is oversurplus, naturally the pricing of tea has to be affected. And this is cyclic. It will not last forever. We foresaw this coming because after every 5 years in this country, we have been seeing after the 5th year, prices of tea slump. But in the 6th year, the prices will pick up, and I can just appeal to the farmers not to uproot tea because we are completely confident that next year will be a different story.
That's an interesting trend you raise about the first 5-year cyclical circle. Is it affected by, is it climate? Is it, drought? Is it global prices?
It's a combination of factors. I mentioned to you that we are tied up globally with the global economy. So production in terms of climate changes after every 5 years. So in 2018, we got very good rains in this country. That contributed to the high production of tea in 2018. That increased from the 476 million in 2017 to 500 million in 2018. That means that there was an overproduction of almost over 20-point-something million. That excess supply must go somewhere. Remember, demand is going down, but production is going up. So the reason is both climate, and demand, because naturally in any agricultural commodity, when the supply is high, it directly affects demand, and it directly affects prices. And this is cyclic. I've mentioned after 5 years, we expect it to come down, and we expect the prices to appreciate. Beginning this month to the end of the year, and it will continue to appreciate throughout next year for the next 5 years.
You seem very confident about that. It's, how much do you see it going up to? You had mentioned earlier that in 2018 prices even went up to about $4 a kilogram. Average price now is about 2.5, slightly lower actually than $2.
Yes.
How high do you see it going in 2019 or 2020?
In 2020, the prices might surprise farmers because the year 2019, we experienced prolonged drought. The amount of rainfall we got in this country was below normal. So production for 2019 has been down. That will translate because of accumulative production. Basically, production next year, because of lack of carryover. When you overproduce in 1 year, there's a lot of carryover into the subsequent year. Next year, there will be no problem of any carryover due to overproduction, because currently the production is down by almost 20%. When it is down by 20% in 2019, then farmers will enjoy the benefits of those low figures in 2020, from 2020, and I believe those prices will remain firm up to the year 2023. So we only expect a similar trend in the year 2024.
So it's a good time for tea. It's just the bottom of the cycle, and it will appreciate. So predictions of lower bonuses this year, how do you see that impacting the industry?
The lower bonuses this year is a reality that we have to live with, because we over-rely on export market, and the bonuses are only paid based on the prevailing average prices of tea in the auction, because I mentioned that we sell 95% of our tea through the auction. So when the prices are down, the returns for the farmers are also diminished. So this year, 2019, bonuses will reduce by an average of 20-30%. Because it goes in tandem with price reduction.
Of course.
If last year the average price per kilo was at $2.58, this year, one of the months, it reduced to $1.76. That means that there's a drastic decline in prices. And the only reason why there was that decline in prices, apart from production, our traditional tea markets were not stable. Pakistan, that is the largest buyer of Kenyan tea had their currency devaluated. So the devaluation of Pakistan currency resulted to diminished purchasing power by the Pakistanis. That affected their buying capacity in the auction. They had to stop buying expensive teas and start bidding for cheap teas. In fact, they had come up with a policy to ensure that any tea that goes to Pakistan is bought at an average of $3, not below $3. But we have teas in this country, especially from the smallholder segment, KTDA, that goes as high as $4.5, $4.8, $4.9 in good years. So that means that those expensive teas cannot be bought by Pakistan buyers because the purchasing power of their people has diminished. Then Egypt, they also have inflation problems. Their inflation was up by over 20%. That has also affected their purchasing power. We have countries like Iran. They have sanctions by America. Last week, the American government had sanctioned their central bank. That means if you trade with any trader in Pakistan, it will be very difficult to get paid because the dollars must be cleared from the American banks. Yeah, so that means that the Iranians will not be able to trade to buy Kenyan tea.
Let's still stay with the export markets for a bit. Kenya and China recently struck an agreement to export at least 5 million kilograms of both black and purple tea. How do you see that changing? And I guess in the context of we are dependent on the export markets, but it is a time to also explore new markets. How do you see that panning out?
That will work for the benefit of the industry because China basically do not support black CTCT. So the agreement that was signed was done on specialty tea, that is both purple tea and orthodox tea, green orthodox or black orthodox. So this will be a big advantage to Kenyan tea producers because a huge segment of what is currently being produced as black CTCT will be used to produce specialty tea for the Chinese market. And because of their population, I believe those 5 million kilos will go up because in terms of quality and the safety of Kenyan tea is far much higher than Chinese tea because in Kenya we do not use agrochemicals. So
there's been a call for, enhanced growth of specialty teas. That's the purple tea, white tea, perhaps the black orthodox or green orthodox tea. How is that, are the local players actually now getting into those markets in a big way?
Yes. The Tea Directorate or the Kenyan government had come up with a strategy to ensure that we diversify our production. Apart from over-relying on black CTCT, the government started promoting the implementation or investment in cottage industries. The essence of doing the cottage investment is to ensure that we increase the margins of specialty tea production so that we stop over-reliance on black CTCT. And this is where now the entrepreneurs in Kenya, they have already installed quite a number of cottage plants and they have already ventured into the production of specialty teas. And that is the reason why the delegation of Chinese that came to Kenya, they specifically came to engage this segment of the market, which will be a plus as it grows, the supply of black CTC will go down, and this will meet demand. That may eventually result to a balance or competitive prices of black CTCs. Remember, the prices are relatively static currently, but production cost in this country is very high. Cost of labor, cost of energy, that is power, the cost of wood fuel. The labor cost increases at an average rate of 10% per year. Yeah? But prices do not increase with those margins. When you come to power, the power cost is extreme. Power, energy cost alone takes almost 30% of our production cost of tea. So something has to be done for Kenyan tea to be competitive. We must work on quite a number of issues. Diversification, like what you have said, the specialty, automation of the factories, automation of harvesting, tea plucking too. Which has always been quite a sticky point, especially when it comes to the tea pickers. Yes. How is that going currently? You can't fight technology. Somebody called Charles Darwin came up with the theory of natural selection. And in his theory, he stated that in the struggle for existence, organisms that adapt easily to the changing environment survives. So in business, the key word is adaptability. So we can't fight technology in terms of automation. So currently the cost of hand plucking is very high. When you introduce mechanical harvesting, you are able to reduce the cost of plucking by 60%. And that will translate to higher returns for farmers.
Absolutely.
So it is something that needs to be embraced by this country, and it should be introduced intelligently to ensure that the quality is not compromised.
Absolutely. Now, there's currently a proposed law that would restrict exports of raw tea and coffee to compel players in the two sector to make value addition as part of their production process. And I know you said that in Ngorongo, 80% is raw tea, 20% is branded or packaged tea.
Yes.
How do you see the branded aspect growing?
The branded aspect growing is untapped potential in this country. But the problem is it is punitive in this country to grow the branded segment of tea in this country, because the bulk export or the raw export of tea is exempted from VAT. But when you brand your tea in this country, you have to pay the 16% VAT. Remember this, we also import packing materials. On the packing materials, you pay the VAT. On the tea itself, you pay VAT. So it is cheaper for tea to be exported in bulk than tea being packaged or branded locally. So we engaged a number of government agencies to encourage them to remove the VAT segment to make the branding category competitive, because the tea branded local is relatively expensive, and that is also working against local consumption. But it is something that can add more value, because producers have the power to dictate prices of branded teas. In the auction, the prices are dictated by foreign buyers, not producers. So the only way that the tea sector can survive is to promote the branding of Kenyan tea. Because currently the bulk exports is very unfortunate that Kenya loses its identity at the auction in Mombasa.
Absolutely.
Once the tea has been bought in Mombasa, that is the end of Kenya. Nobody knows Kenyan tea anywhere out of this country. So it is high time the country came up with a strategy to ensure that we promote branded tea or value addition in this country and create a conducive environment for investors to invest in
and
value
for those
addition.
businesses to thrive. As we wind up, a conversation that's now going on, within the tea industry is that players and stakeholders should now focus on quality other than quantity of tea. And you've alluded to it earlier, where you said, annually the production is going up by, you said 5%?
Yes.
5%. But should the focus now move to the quality of tea? And what can we benefit from that?
The quality of tea has remained one of the major focus of Kenya for generations. And I believe that quality is subjective. But when we focus more on quality, we should not forget that what pays the farmer is not quality per se.
It's a quantity. It
is a balance between quality and quantity. Because the farmer is paid based on the number of kilos that's supplied to the factory. So it is the responsibility of the sector players to ensure that a balance is struck between competitive quality and quantity, so that none of the sectors is affected. Yeah, because KTDA is known for quality tea. This is undisputed fact. Yeah, because they strictly go for the two leaves and above that give the best leaf and leaf appearance. But still, despite those quality parameters, the prices have been coming down. So if we just push quality alone, which is a good thing, my view is maintain or improve the quality, but at the same time, make sure that productivity in the farm is also improved, because this is what pays the farmer. So a lot of research has been done in terms of production. Yes. Now we need research by Tea Research Institute on various product diversifications, so that we don't just rely on CTC the way we have been doing over years.
And perhaps an expansion of export markets as well.
Export market, yes.
All right, thank you so much, George Omuga, Chief Executive Officer of Ngorongo Tea Company, who has been with us on the Capital Point, just giving us insights into the tea industry, challenges it's facing, and the opportunities therein for entrepreneurs, especially within the branded tea segment. You're watching Capital Point. We'll be back in just a moment.